I've been doing street photography for over 10 years now, and it's been a constant learning experience all throughout that time. And so I went from basically knowing nothing to, like, at least at this point, I feel like I have, a grasp on things, and I know what I like and what I don't like, and I know ways to or strategies to get the types of photos that I want. So in this video, I thought I'd share what I've learned throughout the years, and what I would basically do differently, or how I would approach things differently back when I started, so that I would have, better odds of making the types of photos that I want to. So the first one I'll share is to study the greats of street photography. I did this when I first started in street photography. It's learning about Alex Webb and Harry Gruyere and Henry Cartier-Bresson and other street photographers. That's what drew me to the genre in the first place. But at this point, I just would spend more time with my street photography books, and I would seek out more street photographers to get a broader idea of, different ideas from different street photographers. There's just a ton of value to be had from street photographers and going through their books. In my opinion, it's hands down the best way to consume street photography, and learn about it, learn your preferences, your likes and dislikes. So yeah, I highly recommend choosing some street photographers, learning about them, and then buying their books and spending time with their books. So here are some of the street photographers who I recommend checking out when you're getting started in street photography. I've just chosen a few here. There are a lot more than what I'm gonna list here, but I'm gonna list a few that have a pretty wide range of styles, so that you can get a better idea of the types of styles that you gravitate towards in street photography. So the first one is Henry Cartier-Bresson. He's a French photographer, and was one of the pioneers of street photography. And he coined the term the decisive moment. And when people think of the decisive moment, they often think of this one image of his where there's a man jumping over a puddle. And so he basically captured this man jumping over this puddle in mid-flight. And there's your decisive moment right there. That's the most interesting moment of what took place. So the next one I'll mention is William Eggleston. William Eggleston was inspired by Henry Cartier-Bresson and some of the other street photographers that came before him. And William Eggleston was one of the very first color photographers who photographed on color film, and was kind of one of the early pioneers of using color film and kind of lending it legitimacy. One of the interesting thing about William Eggleston is that he was inspired by your typical street photographers who took photos of people in public places, in typically in busy city environments. And William Eggleston was from not that. So he lived in Memphis, and I think some other areas down in the South. But the point is that where he was living, in Memphis and the other areas down there, are not a hustle and bustle type city where you have very walkable infrastructure, and there's busy streets with people walking all around. He dealt with the fact that he didn't always have people to photograph. And so he photographed, like he did what he could in his situation, and he did things like cityscapes, urban landscapes, and took photos of like ordinary things. And it's like, it's just amazing, like what, like how he sees and what he was able to do with like, you know, the I don't know, bad situation or prospects for doing street photography. He just like took ordinary things and like made them just like very interesting to look at. So one of my favorite photographers is Alex Webb. And so Alex Webb was one of the early color photographers and popularized and legitimized using color film. He used Kodachrome, and he did a lot of travels throughout South America. And he is known for like having complex and layered compositions. And yeah, he kind of straddles the line between like complexity and just outright chaos. And I just think that he's like a master, a genius at doing that. So the last one I'll mention is Vivian Maier. Her work wasn't even really truly discovered until like after her death. And so she kind of photographed in obscurity during her lifetime. And later on, her photographs were discovered by someone who like bought, I think, like the majority of her body of work, like in, you know, some sort of like auction or like estate sale. And yeah, for like her primary job and income, she worked as a nanny, and she lived in both Chicago and New York City. And like, as she was working, when she was like taking the kids around town, she would take photographs. And yeah, she has a truly amazing body of work, just like really like does an excellent job of like showing slices of time periods. And also her self-portraits are really good too. So the next thing I would recommend doing is figuring out the styles that you like. So that's kind of why I led with the street photographers that I recommend checking out, is that hopefully once you check out some street photographers, you get an idea, a sense of like the type of street photography you like, because it's pretty broad. And street photography is, a subjective subject in terms of like what is considered street photography. I think once you give it some time and sit with books and really like study the street photographers who have come before you, it'll give you a better idea of like what you want to do, like what types of photos you want to take. And then like once you figure that out, you can go to the next stage and figure out how to create photos similar to the photographers that you respect. So you can't do street photography without gear. You need some gear. So you need obviously a bare minimum of a camera and a lens. I think it's a good idea to use whatever gear you already have. So everybody's got a cell phone. I think it's a good idea to go out and use that at first. At least, like your first couple outings or whatever. Or maybe you have like a point and shoot sitting around. Use that and like to get your feet wet and see if you enjoy the experience before you, invest in more expensive gear. When you do decide to, buy some gear, invest in gear, I really recommend keeping it small, whatever you get. Like get, a small body, small lens, You can do either a fixed lens camera or an interchangeable lens camera. I think fixed lens cameras are great in a lot of ways because a lot of them are just more compact. And the reason I mention this is because if you're going to do street photography, you need to take your gear with you. You don't always have the opportunity to like set aside time and spend an entire day doing street photography. But so having small gear will make you take it with you when you go out to the grocery store, you go run errands or whatever. And while you're doing that, you can take some photos on the way. When you choose a lens, obviously you got to choose a focal length. I personally recommend using something on the wide end, wide to normal point of field of view. So that's, I would say basically somewhere in between 24 millimeters to 50 millimeter focal length lenses. I personally gravitate towards 28 millimeters and 35 millimeter lenses. I think those are great because they show the scene very pretty close to like what the human eye sees. And so these cameras make you feel like you're in the scene, like when you're viewing the photos. And it creates this very, I don't know, real and authentic feeling like of the photos. One downside to using wide angle lenses is that you have to get close to your subjects. So it can be a good idea to start out with a longer focal length lens, like a 50 millimeter lens. That way it gives you, you know, some distance in between you and subjects. So, and like you can also do things like take photos of people across the street, and you wouldn't be able to really do that nearly as effectively with a wide angle lens like a 24 or a 28. So the next thing I would recommend doing a lot of is just to go out and do street photography a lot. Like it just takes a ton of practice and repetition, and like for one, to learn, and then also to get your photos that are eventually going to be like, you know, part of your portfolio that you're going to keep, that you're going to potentially, you know, use in like any books or whatever that you put out there. You got to pound the pavement and, you know, put the steps in, put the reps in. That rhymed. But yeah, you got to do it. Like the benefit is, or the great thing about street photography is that it's like a great way to leave the house. A lot of us, I'm sure, like have a bad tendency of, you know, just staying at home and doom scrolling on social media, or, you know, binge watching Netflix or TV or whatever. And street photography is a great way to get out in the real world and like experience like life. So next is to analyze your photos. I would use a program like Lightroom or Capture One, put your photos in there, and then use that to, you know, review them, go through them, make your selections, and start sitting with your photos and potentially printing them. That's a great thing to do. But yeah, just analyzing your photos for what you like about them and determining what you don't like about them. So I think that's like a critical component of like creating a body of work that you're going to be proud of, is like determining your preferences. So once you've really sat with your photos, some patterns should emerge, and you should, you know, start being able to determine, like, do I like this photo? Do I like this style? And then you can, you know, think back and be like, this is how I ended up, you know, getting this photo. And then you can, you know, work towards putting yourself in similar situations that would lead to you producing more photos like that, in that vein. I also think it's just as important to figure out what you don't like in street photography. I know from experience what it's like to, be going through my archive and being like, like this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And seeing a pattern of things, of types of photos that I don't like. And I can keep that in mind for the future so that, I don't take more photos like that. And also that I don't waste time taking photos like that, which will free me up to create the types of photos that I really do want. So the last thing I'll talk about is photo editing. I think a lot of photographers are guilty of just, poor editing choices when you're first starting out. And obviously it's something that you get better at over time. But I think, one thing that I could have done better when I first started out was just keeping it more simplified. I think the tendency for a lot of beginner photographers, street photographers, just photography in general, is to just overdo it, to just ram the slider to the side. So yeah, I understand the temptation to do this, but I think it's important to have some restraint and also figure out the editing style that you like, and also a style that you're going to be proud of in the future. Something that stands the test of time. So that's gonna do it for this one on getting started in street photography. I hope these ideas and concepts were helpful for you. It was a really exciting time for me when I started learning about street photography. I just consumed all of the articles I could find and bought a ton of street photography books. So I'm happy for you that you're in this stage, and best of luck. Let me know how it goes.